October 7th was a setup for a stand down. Even American traitor turned Israeli spy Jonathan Pollard admits it. If you believe Israel is special, you are not a Christian. Israel is small, not special, and certainly not sacred. Israel offers abortion on demand and is totally dependent on U.S. aid. We don't need Israel. Israel needs America. Israel is not the Jewish state. It's just a state. There are Israeli, American, British, and every other country Jews. Judaism is a religion. Zionism, a political movement. Per Jesus, Jews are not God's special people. Those who follow him are. When they killed the son, they lost the vineyard. Israel anti-Semitism is a lie. Almost all Israelis are Ashkenazi, not from the Middle East, but Arabs, Palestinians, and Coptic Christians are. Gaza is genocide. The USS Liberty was war. Assassinating Iranian diplomats was treachery. Israeli Knesset members forbid U.S. citizenship. American Congress are infested with Israeli dual citizenship. In 2023, an IDF sniper killed 2 Christian women inside the parish. An Israeli tank demolished Mother Teresa's convent for the disabled. Charlie Kirk abandoned the Israeli cause just 48 hours before his murder. You cannot serve 2 masters. Choose. I'm a retired soldier, special agent and spy, turned whistleblower warrior, served in sabotage, rejected and redeemed, failed and forgiven, betrayed and saved, rejecting revenge, humbled and blessed, repurposed in redemption, as chaplain, leader, teacher, and truth teller. Now, America's intelligence officer, following God, leading my family, any that choose to join on our long walk to faith and freedom. Welcome. I'm Jeff Prather, and this is the Prather Point. Welcome, everybody. Good to be with you. See folks on Rumble and on X both. So today, Israel admits targeting Tucker and Candace is the show title, but also why no military accountability for warp speed. The FBI pushes Charlie's assassination witness to delete his videos. Whistleblower Charlie Kirk says that Charlie Kirk was killed because he got the Epstein list. And then we will have a very special guest, Dr. Julia ENGELS, whistleblower on CABAL child trafficking and exposing where the CIA had admitted MK altering. So not earth-shaking show today. That's why I don't say breaking or anything, but important stuff. And I'm not going to make things more dramatic than they are. I'm always going to give you the truth there. So if you can, go to patreon.com, sign up at the $5, $15, or $25 level. Appreciate that to support the show. Keep the show completely free. At the $5 level, you get curated news stories. You can follow along with every cast. $15, you get special resources. $25, you get daily training videos with me and the opportunity to join my handgun martial arts class or my Bujinkan class or both as well. You can also go to jeffreyprather.locals.com, sign up for $9 a month, $90 a year as well. Don't forget to go to teamamericacoffe.com, get some great coffee there, and check out MehanMD or mehanmd.com, my doc. Dr. Meehan has passed on, but Colonel Terry Lakin, who would not acknowledge Obama as the commander-in-chief because of the faked birth certificate and went to Leavenworth for it, is my doc. He's a medical doctor, but he uses a lot of alternative technologies as well. Go to heavensharvest.com, code JP15 for 15% off. That's where we get our seeds as well. And jeffreyprather.com/Jace. You can get your prescription medicines. And of course, sat123.com, sat123.com. Support the show that way by getting a sat phone if you can. You can go to get galileo.com and follow me where I do sat text as well. So jumping right into Israeli officials admit Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson being monitored as combatant targets. So the Israeli government has crossed a chilling new line, opening openly threatening Tucker Carlson and Candace Owens, branding them engines of anti-Semitism. And of course, I've gotten a lot of mail. I do have a really nice correspondence with a Jewish gentleman going on that's valid, but I've had other fakes on. But this statement sounds like a declaration of war. Israeli officials claimed the pair pose an existential threat to the state of Israel, which of course is a lie. It's against, of course, free speech. The threats were issued by Israel's Diaspora Affairs and Combating Anti-Semitism Minister Amichai Chikli in the Jerusalem Post. Qatar is partially responsible for the increase in diaspora. Anti-Semitism diaspora means the spread out Jewish people around the world. And Chikli said in a conversation with the Jerusalem Post about Aliyah and hatred towards Jews. The AI-based system that the ministry is now using allows us to monitor every social network and provide details to prevent terror attacks against Jewish communities. So right there, there's a jump. There's an illogical jump from people expressing their viewpoint, like I love Israel, I hate Israel, I hate Israelis, I love Israelis, simply speaking one's mind with all of a sudden terrorism, which is doing an act to oppress and terrorize people. So that is, of course, a lie. This is propaganda. This is psyops. And of course, because of American Christian Zionism, it is well accepted through all kinds of churches in America. And they say they're in constant correspondence with the leadership of social networks, especially TikTok. That means information influence operations platforms, which are also intelligence collection platforms, intelligence information collection platforms as well. And Chikli noted that the ministry does a lot of work monitoring anti-Israel influencers such as Candace Owens and Tucker Carlson. They are monitoring them. So now if President Trump was America first, he would immediately demand Bibi and the government of Israel rescind and apologize for this terror threat as a provocation for war, or have all aid and relations suspended immediately if President Trump was America first. Unfortunately, he is not America first. He is Israel first. That has become very clear. And this incidentally is, by the way, somebody on X was saying, hey, Doc Pete Chambers is running for governor of Texas. Why don't you interview him? I'm like, yeah, I'm sure you know him well. I'm like, yes, I do know him well. That's why I'm not interviewing him. So the reason I'm not is because he got the jab. He did not reject or resist. He went right along with it. And now he is running for governor. He won't win. But more importantly, when I was criticizing Abbott's efforts as pushing back and the gate right up the street was open, he's like, well, you can't do that. Now I was also criticizing him working with the feds because the feds are all in on it. He said, hey, we're watching you, which is kind of like the Israeli government saying about Tucker and Candace, hey, we're watching you. So I do not take well to threats or intimidation. And so, no, I will not be interviewing Pete Chambers, and I am not intimidated by him, and I don't care if he's watching me or not, and neither should you. So moving on to why no military accountability for warp speed. This is really affecting the military quite a bit. There is an increase in military recruits, and I'm really torn on this because I loved the military and I used to recommend the military to all my young martial arts students. But despite numerous warnings from service members and veterans to President Trump and the Secretary of War Pete Hegseth, they continue to neglect the issue of accountability related to the unlawful implementation of the COVID-19 shot mandate. Of course, Comirnaty was never even made. Of course, back in 2023, Secretary of Defense Austin, that coward, helped carry out an independent survey targeting both enlisted and officers, and they were drummed out for that. And of course, they should not have been. They had religious objections. We all remember this too, but nothing has been done about this whatsoever. So there was a survey in 2023, revealed that 79% of participants expressed their intention to retire within the next 1 to 5 years. And almost 10 months into War Secretary Pete Hegseth's tenure, a second survey was conducted to reevaluate the sentiments of service members currently active in today's military. With a reduced number of participants, the fall 2025 survey had only 66 respondents, which is interesting in itself that they're not responding. Many of the individuals who took part in the previous survey were likely forced out or compelled to resign or retire. Nonetheless, 59 participants of the fall 2025 survey, equating to 89%, indicate they would not recommend their children, family members, or friends to join the military. Again, I used to recommend all my young students, men, boys, young men, to join the military. Really reluctant to do that now for a lot of reasons, because Trump is doing Israel's bidding, but also because this bioweapon was forced upon everybody, and they are not doing anything about it. 64 of the 66 participants, or 97% of the fall 2025 survey, believe Department of Defense leaders should be held accountable. Of course they should. One service member's perspective suggested that the oath taken by certain service members to uphold and protect the Constitution mean nothing, particularly for those whose oaths were challenged during the COVID-19 epidemic. And this was in writing. Careers were destroyed by this. Another service member expressed a similar sentiment, showed their true colors during the COVID pandemic. I lack the trust and confidence for this current military leadership. They've become the inverse examples of what the military should be. And I will not trust the life of my children in their hands. That is a hell of an indictment, because if you don't know, most of us joined the military because our dads or our grandpas were in. My dad was a World War II veteran. My wife's dad was a World War II veteran. We want to be like them. And so this is a big detriment that the government is not coming clean on this. Trump is still bragging about warp speed. He has never confessed, repented this, and he's not requiring any confession or repentance. Just like we're not requiring any confession or repentance for all the ICE Border Patrol guys that ran children along the way. These leaders shunned the clear evidence and laws presented by numerous service members, demonstrated the DoD's enforcement of the COVID vax mandate was illegal, yet these leaders chose to echo political talking points. So Operation Warp Speed was a U.S. government initiative launched during the COVID-19 pandemic to accelerate the development, production, and distribution of vaccines and treatments. The enemy referred to in this context was the SARS-CoV virus, which was never isolated, by the way, so it wasn't really true. It was all faked. Comirnaty, the military vaccine, was never, ever produced, ever. So it was a fraud. It was like selling fake dope. This analogy was framed the pandemic as a response as a wartime effort, because to do the PrEP Act and bring in DOD and hand it off from HHS to DOD, it had to be a wartime act. And therefore there had to be an enemy. Well, there is no enemy. Should have been China, really should have been DARPA. But the PrEP Act via DOD was done so they could take charge. So to validate the brave soldiers that resisted the false flag operation would expose the DOD, DARPA, BARDA, deep state, global cabal ties behind it all. So once again, loyal troops are sacrificed for the corrupt elite. But the other casualty is the tarnished reputation of the U.S. military. Without a righteous military, we will continue to devolve into an evil empire, just like the Romans did as well. And also, FBI is pushing a Charlie assassination witness to delete his videos. A key witness to the assassination of conservative commentator Charlie Kirk has come forward, saying that FBI agents under Kash Patel ordered him to delete footage of the video. He had a lot of recording, I guess, close up, because there were lots of people there. They said it would be better for me mentally if I deleted it, because you got to get your mind right. You can't think for yourself. This is classic FBI cover-up, all they do now. Then one of them called me later to confirm to see if I'd done it. The FBI's official account, of course, is ridiculous. And Judge Eric Graff has placed more than 3,000 people, including eyewitnesses, under gag orders. So this is absurd and ridiculous what they're doing. The cover-up is going to fail, as cover-ups do. And this is really a turning point, literally, for Charlie Kirk's organization. Even though there is a lot of corruption there. And speaking of that, there is a whistleblower who says Charlie was killed because he got the Epstein list that we are not able to get, but he was able to get it. And he was given it by loyal government folks who believed he would do the right thing, because obviously the government is just covered up because they've got friends who are on the list. So they're just going to continue to go along with it. But he would not have done that. And so this whistleblower is saying that he had the list and he was going to out the list, and he didn't care what happened. So that's another reason why he was killed. Of course, again, my assessment, many people's assessment, is Epstein was Mossad, run by Mossad. Ghislaine Maxwell's dad was. Ghislaine Maxwell was running Epstein. So according to whistleblowers deep inside Turning Point USA, Charlie Quirk was quietly granted access to the Epstein list, the real one, unredacted and untouched. The files came from government insiders who trusted Quirk to expose the truth responsibly, believing he was one of the few figures with the reach and courage to do it. But what truly sealed his fate was Israel's hidden role in the global trafficking, the participation of Israeli political leadership, and the unthinkable connection to his own wife. And that goes back to this Romanian child organization. And Virginia Guffrey's posthumous memoir, and remember, she is one of the victims of she supposedly suicided herself, and she said, I'm not going to suicide. She was one of the Epstein victims. And her new book is out, and she has said that Maxwell bragged about performing oral sex on Clooney. Of course, on my Patreon, I've published that famous photo again. I've used as a thumbnail of Obama and Clooney sitting on the speedboat with the little Chinese girl at their feet, gagging. And they said, oh, that's Obama's niece. I've since seen photographs of her wrapped up in cellophane, dead. There's also photos of her cuddling in the White House on Obama's lap. Totally inappropriate, even if she was his niece, but no statements ever from that. And so, if you dissent from this view of Israel and you actually want to uncover the corruption of pedophilia, then the dissent is punishable by death. So there are 3 people, according to whistleblowers, who know the full truth inside Turning Point USA. That's why several folks, Bill Gates has kind of gone quiet and kind of reversed some of his positions. Now we're going to hear from a Turning Point USA donor who says that Charlie was shattered by the evidence that many of the world's richest and most powerful people were compromised pedophiles. So at least this is still getting out, and this is also explaining why now this all was happening in this regard. So some good news, because I know I'm giving you guys a lot of bad news, is breaking. There's a major shakeup in ICE leadership underway across the country. Border Patrol officials will be taking over for ICE, Immigration and Customs Enforcement. So this is actually very good news. Again, this is my lane. Worked with all Border Patrol, worked with ICE all the time. Per 4 senior DHS and Trump admin sources, a mass removal of ICE leadership around the country is underway, up to 12 ICE field offices. And this move is spearheaded by Corey Lewandowski, and a handful of ICE chiefs will likely be replaced by Border Patrol and CBP officials, Customs and Border Protection. This is good. This is definitely good. Los Angeles, Phoenix, Philadelphia, Denver, El Paso, San Diego, Seattle, Portland, New Orleans. These are ICE officials that will be demoted or reassigned, and ICE is very, very corrupt. And I know this firsthand. This is very good news. ICE special agents are not all, but many, and maybe even most, like the FBI, a corrupted class. I speak from direct experience. One of my dojo students, David Petersmark, was an ICE ASAC, Assistant Special Agent in Charge, in OPR, Office of Professional Responsibility, what you call Internal Affairs. I flew him to Japan to train with my Grandmaster teacher, Hatsumi Sensei. I flew him to Hawaii to train hundreds of soldiers under a warrior school contract. He repaid me by systematically recruiting almost all of my black belts and students from me to his dojo. He even had his brother nominate him for the U.S. Martial Arts Hall of Fame. He was investigated by OPR while OPR, which is very unusual. They don't usually investigate themselves for multiple sexual accusations. And his complete loyalty extended not just to me, but to his wife as well. So that's good news, somewhat at least. But I want to get to my guest. And it's interesting how I ran across her. Is I was I'm on the board of Targeted Justice, and I was in a board meeting, which I'm rarely in. But she was presenting, and I was very impressed with her presentation. She's a very accomplished and sharp leader. Dr. Juliet Engel moved to Moscow in 1999 and founded the Angel Coalition to combat human trafficking. Over the next 10 years, the Angel Coalition grew into an underground railroad that assisted thousands of victims. She also co-founded Moscow's Municipal Orphanage Staff Training Center. As an orphan myself, you know, that's very personal to me. For Women and Children First, and a nationwide program of community center support for single mothers. The Babushka Brigade. Her life was a constant collage of travel and adventure with a cluster of Russian colleagues and friends. She sweated in the banyas. I don't even know what that is, but we'll ask her. And jumped into frigid Siberian lakes. Sounds like a sweat lodge and going into the breaking the ice. That's what I used to do. Siberian lakes, traversed by train and bus to small villages. Ate blinis with honey in Novgorod. Smoked fish on the shores of Lake Onega. Sailed the Great Volga River, delivering aid to orphanages, getting to know the kids, watching them grow up over the years, often in vain to keep them safe. Came back to America in 2010 when her protege was murdered by traffickers, and the Russian military intelligence warned her that she would be next. Interesting that Russian military intelligence warned her. We'll get into that. Of course, I always say Putin and Russia are our allies, not necessarily that Putin's a good guy or Russia's good, but that they are against child trafficking, and in many things. So they're allies. The enemy of my enemy is not necessarily my friend. They are my ally. But she currently lives in Washington, D.C. and is writing her memoirs. She's the author of several books. But what I really noticed was she was talking about how she discovered the recently published CIA admissions to MK Ultra. And I published those on Patreon a while back, and I've republished those on Patreon and Locals again. But without further ado, Dr. Engels, welcome to the Praise Point.
Thank you, Major. I'm glad to be here.
I was really impressed with your presentation and how sharp you are. You even corrected me today when I got my phone number wrong. Sorry about that. You're very well organized. So I do want to go through your fascinating background, but I really want to start with the where I noticed during the Targeted Justice meeting is that you found the recently published CIA files. So let's talk about those, because the really significance is everybody's saying conspiracy theory, conspiracy. Then the CIA actually admits, oh yeah, we've been doing it for 50 years.
Yeah, I didn't include that part of my bio, but I was born into the MK Ultra program. My uncles were all OSS agents who were present in Nuremberg for the Nuremberg trials. They were operational during Project Paperclip in bringing over 1,500 of the German scientists who had conducted the experiments in the concentration camps. And they got their hands on all the data they'd collected and did not want any of it to go to waste. So they brought at least 1,500 of those infamous scientists. Instead of hanging them, they brought them to Huntsville, Alabama, and then set them up across the United States in multiple centers with unlimited funding and access to American children. And they started by putting their own children in. So a little bit of history. The OSS was the precursor to the CIA. The CIA was founded in 1947 by the group I will call 12 Evil Men, because people came to power that should not have come to power. People got their hands on documents that should have been destroyed from the concentration camps. And they gave second life to some of the master criminals of the world, and then turned their own children over to them. So the CIA was born in 1947. I was born in 1949. In 1952, my uncle and a group from Arlington Hall started the NSA, the National Security Agency. And in 1953, the same group started the MK Ultra project that was put under Sidney Gottlieb, who was known as the chief poisoner of the CIA for developing vaccines, which were bioweapons. So, the whole plan for the pandemic goes back to the 1950s. And in 1955, I was put into the MK Ultra program at the age of 6, sold into the program by my father at a ceremony, which just reeks of all their Masonic connections, which they did. They were Shriners. So, so that was my background up to the age of 6. So I actually grew up in the MK Ultra program, which involved clearly I was being trained as an agent, and what they had discovered through these horrific torture and satanic abuse programs that have been carried out in the concentration camps is that if you traumatize a child with physical, mental trauma repeatedly, that the child reacts by dissociating if they're able to survive. This is the one survival mechanism that helps you survive. So you dissociate, and this starts splitting your mind. So all of us who are survivors have what's called dissociative identity disorder. It's not really a disorder. It's a massively powerful survival mechanism. But I wound up with memories boxed into other sections of my brain so I could deliberately not ever think of them, remember them, or access them.
So it's a
So
spiritual emotional wound. It's a result of spiritual emotionally wounding.
exactly, and they knew how to do it because they'd been experimenting on it for 50 years. That was part of the research that the Nazis received. Plus, they used a lot of spiritual. I mean, they were going around the world collecting artifacts like Raiders of the Lost Ark. I mean, that was based on truth. For
Yeah.
instance,
So let me stop you there because you've said a lot that's really interesting. Is if people don't know, Hitler's own staff people said he was possessed, and they said on his own he wasn't much, but when he was possessed, he was unstoppable. Hitler was fascinated with spiritual artifacts, including the spear of Longinus, which is the spear supposedly that pierced Jesus's side. So the Raiders of the Lost Ark stuff, that was all based upon the Thule Society. Hitler was deeply involved into the occult, so it was satanically sourced. And so what you're saying, I think, is when Paperclip brought these German Nazi scientists over, they brought with them this evil culture. And as they let them continue to do their work, they didn't separate it out from the evil culture and the evil ceremonies. Do I have that all right?
That's correct. And they had their hands on warehouses full of research artifacts, the results of experimentation. So they should have burned it all. That should have just ended it. But they didn't. They kept it and they thought they could use it. And at the same time, Tesla had died and left all of his research to MIT. And it was managed there by John Trump, who is Donald Trump's uncle. And he was also in Nuremberg. So you had this amazing collection of humans who saw in this tremendous archive of energy information that Tesla had left, plus the satanic and supernatural experiments of the Nazi concentration camps. They saw a way to make themselves into gods. And this is exactly what they proceeded to try to do. And that's why so many of the first children into the MK Ultra programs were theirs.
So let's go into that a little bit. So why and how did the OSS turned CIA plank holders voluntarily give their children? And I understand where this comes. This comes from the Nazi children's programs, which, if people don't know, because of World War I, Nazi Germany did not have a lot of fathers So again, this is the Führer, doesn't mean father, it means leader, but Hitler was like a father figure because there were, all the studies show if you don't have a father around, I'm always talking about this, then you're not going to make it. You're easily influenced, drugs, dropping out. So I get where it comes from Germany, but why then did Americans, were they so easily convinced to do this with their own children, like in your own case?
I don't know. No one ever spoke to me about it. In fact, it was completely denied. I mean, I would disappear from the home, from the school for months at a time, but because I was in these camps and annexes and being subject to experimentation and torture and drugs and programming over and over and over again. My program was to become a scientist and a spy. And so their motivation, I'm trying to figure this out. But they denied it. So people who came forward and said, this happened to me, I've been raped, I've been tortured, I've been abused by it was very obvious in my case that the people that would pick me up were Navy. We're talking the Navy here. So we were always guarded by Navy MPs. So my father was in the Navy. So there's no doubt in my mind that, and then part of it was US Army Air Force at that time. But in my case, it was Navy, but I think the military, they wanted these secrets, they wanted the technology, they wanted the weapons, and they viewed the vaccines that were developed by Gottlieb and his group in the Tactical Services Division of the CIA and then in MK Ultra as bioweapons, mind-controlled bioweapons.
I understand it. Towards the end of the war, they were really worried about Hitler getting rockets and getting nukes, and so there was a quick rush for that. But after the war, it just seems like they wanted to increase their own power base. But what was your indoctrination or initiation ceremony like? You were referencing it like a Masonic thing.
Well, yeah, it was. I had already been mentally and emotionally separated from my mother to the point where I still can't remember my mother, even though she was around. She lived to be 80, but I have no recollection of her. My father was the one I relied on and trusted. And when I was 6 years old, he took me to a park where I met a Navy friend who gave me a bottle of Coca-Cola that was drugged. And I woke up in a satanic ritual where I was tied down, raped from behind, while my father stood there and took money for me. And when I yelled, help me, he turned to me and said, "This is what I raised you for." So at that second, I had the choice to give up completely and surrender, or to become my own master and fight. And I'm a fighter, so I fought. But yeah, so my childhood was a mixture. They wanted those of us who were in the future spy game to grow up in families, if you call my family a family. So half the time I'd be at home with my parents in a normal school, and then the other half the time I was in some god-awful place, including Mexico. They had annexes in Mexico or at various universities. And then eventually Stanford Research Institute was a primary site. And there they had sites in other places. But so that went on until I was 17 years old. And every time I'd come back from one of those places and go to the school, back to school, the school would pick up there was something terribly wrong. And our family would move. So I went from school to school to school to place. And so when I was 17, I escaped in the middle of one of these ceremonies. It was a party for seducing and blackmailing record executives at that particular time. So there were a lot of future rock and rollers and musicians there. And I managed to escape and got myself all the way from, this was in Monterey, California, and drove a stolen car pretty much all the way to Washington State, where I'd gotten myself into the University of Washington. And then I turned around and forgot everything. So I started the University of Washington as a 17-year-old co-ed, tried to look like all the other co-eds, concentrated on doing the best I could do. I had to work, put myself through school, got into medical school, graduated first in my class to my surprise, and had successful medical practice until I was 30 years old and had a daughter who looked just like me, which meant I had to start remembering all this. So, and of course, no psychiatrist, no one had any idea this would be 1980. So there'd been some hearings, but no one knew about the church commission hearings in the 70s. And the CIA and the government denied everything. And every program has a suicide program built into it. So, and this is why I'm out there telling survivors, and they're coming forward by the hundreds right now, is as soon as you start to remember, you're going to hit the suicide program because that's their kill switch. And it's meant to kill you. So like, I don't know if you remember Isaac Cappy, but he came forward, gave all this information, and then jumped off a bridge. That's the suicide program.
Well, I
and
just talked about Virginia Guthrie in Australia
yes,
as well. And of course, Epstein, and of course, many others.
many
My
others.
Team America Iowa recently did a whole conference that I spoke at on child trafficking, and Kathy O'Brien and others were talking about being MK Ultra since children. So you're hardly the lone voice talking about that, but the way you connected from the origins of Nazi Germany and the Nazi origins of the occult makes total sense. You know, the only thing that doesn't make sense is how were the parents conscripted. But I will say, I've often talked about how if you're running high-level informants, as I have done, if you're not careful, they'll start running you. And so it sounds like these experts in manipulation, personality and human manipulation, then turned around and manipulated who brought them over. That's very interesting about Nuremberg too, because you know, after 10 years, I think everybody was out of Nuremberg. There were some executions, but there wasn't much. But there was no, my big problem with Nuremberg was nobody ever looked at any of the source of it. Maybe it was too horrible to look at, but no satanic sourcing of it at all, simply from a very dry legal point of view. I think that was a huge mistake.
Yes, and it let them just walk away with all the material. I mean, it came to this country in a crate, and it was shipped to Huntsville, Alabama, by all accounts.
And that's Redstone. That's big. That's Army rocket base. If people don't know, there's a lot of intelligence goes through there. Yes.
And I don't know where it is now. I know that the records of everyone that came through in Project Paperclip were eventually kept in the building in Oklahoma City that blew up.
Oh, really?
Yeah. It was. In fact, there was even a Nazi museum in the building that was set up by the admiral, a very famous Nazi admiral. Who'd been very.
I just did a show with Margaret Roberts, who wrote the latest book on Oklahoma City, and reveal how it's all ATF, CIA, FBI is behind the whole thing, even German intelligence.
Oh yeah, German intelligence DVD would definitely be there because they were destroying all of the records so that they could not trace who are the descendants of these people, because you know, we're on the third generation since that group was brought over and turned loose, given high-level jobs, and basically have largely taken over. And the person supervising the transfer of all the data and the Nazi scientists bringing them into the United States was Gellin, whose name first name I forget, but he was
Yuri, isn't it Yuri Gellin?
I don't remember. I should have looked it up. I don't remember, but he was the head of Hitler's security. So he was the chief of security for the Fuhrer, and he connected at Nuremberg with these 12 evil men and convinced them of the power they would have if they brought him and they brought the Nazi scientists over to the United States and turned them loose, and how they could elevate their own families into the power's status of gods. So I know that was happening. I know they were thinking that, and MK stands for Mein Kampf, and a lot of the rituals. See, I went in very early into this program. It started in '53. I was in it in '55 because my uncle had been, well, I had 5 uncles who were in that group of 12 evil men, and and uh, I was the first child born into that larger family, so of course they put me in, and so I have kind of, and now I'm 76 years old. I've come out the other side, so I've got an overview that I'm eager to share with everybody because uh, Kathy O'Brien's a little bit younger than me, but there aren't a lot that made it through. Period. So everything I know, everything I can see, I want to share, and I think I do have a useful overview.
No,
But
I think you do. Yeah, I've not understood it as you have presented it so well. That makes
yeah,
a lot.
I mean, we are mind controlled in this country into believing that the CIA is this immortal structure that's been around forever. No, it's been here for since 1947. It's 2 years older than me.
No, I talk about that all the time. I talk about how Washington ran his own network. He was Agent 711, but he ran it personally because I'm a career intel guy. And if you don't run it personally, then you lose control of it. But I
Yeah,
think
yeah,
you elaborate really clearly how in inception. And of course, I also served in Army Special Forces. I think they turned out very well. What comes out of OSS is Army Special Forces, Green Berets, and CIA, where the CIA has always been a mess.
well, yeah, and OSS was a group of elitist, wealthy graduates from secret societies and Ivy League colleges. And I can tell you from knowing my uncles that they were all sexually ambiguous. They were filthy rich. They'd never really had to work in their lives, and they were bored to death. So I think you see that rolling forward too. That disregard for humanity and absolute despised common human beings. They called them all sheep. Even in my program, I was taught that I was a goat and everybody else was a sheep, and they were going to eliminate 99% of the sheep. And it went on from there. And a lot of times I particularly remember being taken to Mexico and for weeks. And this was with a senator, the governor of California. A lot of high level people came down there, and they took 33 children, of which I was one. I was must have been 8 years old. We were practically naked, running around the beach in our underpants for 2 weeks, and being used to summon demons from the sea and from the air, and to call down extraterrestrials and to go transdimensionally and bring entities back. And it was all based on the book that they had, which was Mein Kampf. Now, you can't get Mein Kampf. No one's seen it since 1947. And the English edition, it was translated by Senator Alan McGregor Cranston, who who was a graduate student in Heidelberg in the 30s, and he translated Hitler's book, and he did it so badly that Hitler sued him in an American court in Connecticut and won the case for fraud. But in the meantime, Mein Kampf in the Cranston version had been distributed everywhere in English, and it's immediately became impossible to get an original copy in German, and now the English translations by Stackpole and Son aren't accurate. I mean, we don't know what he was saying or what they were doing or what the tie into the Thule Society, or because magic was a huge part of
Right.
what they were doing.
Yeah, they actually had UFO looking saucer Nazi craft. That's the whole thing with the Nazis going to the moon and everything. But what I keyed something you said is that a bunch of kids were poorly clothed and running around. That made me think of the Finders, which I'm sure you're aware of, is when a sharp highway patrolman or Florida sheriff stops a van who turn out to be CIA later with a bunch of dirty, disheveled, barely clothed kids. So it sounds like they were coming back from one of those junkets.
Yeah. And I got stopped at the border. My parents came to pick me up after one of those junkets. And so there we are in the car with my mother, my father, my brother, all very white, middle class. And I look like a little black Mexican kid because I've been in the sun for 2 weeks and my hair is like totally so bad that they had to shave it off. And I'm wearing my father's shirts because I had no clothes. So my father's driving the car with no shirt. And we got to the border and the border patrol looked at me and said, "Who's that?" And my parents looked at me like they'd never seen me in my life. My father couldn't remember my name, my birth date, uh, anything. So they were going to leave me there. So I, s- I stood up, I talked, I fought for myself. And then they made some phone calls. So I'm sure they called the governor's office who said, "Oh, just let him through." Um, so yeah, so they're transporting kids around. That's been going on. So that would have been 1950s. But, none of it's changed, it's only increased, and, it's gotta stop. It should have stopped then. It's been going on for how since 1940 oh, since 1953, because that's really when all this started. I've been in it since '55, and, it's gotta stop. We gotta stop this. We're setting out to destroy our children, to create a society that protects pedophiles and victimizes parents and children. Everything is backwards. And then we get to the documents that you refer to.
Yeah, that's a great segue. So you mentioned those, and I immediately looked them up. And in December 24, CIA actually published those, probably in December, so that people wouldn't notice, and you noticed. And so let's talk about those a little bit, and talk about what you see as the significance of CIA archives publishing and admitting that they've been doing this for 50 years.
Yes, I'm trying to bring up the first slide. I've got it in the
Well, I can bring it
section.
up.
Oh, okay. So slide 1. Actually, it's in the next one over.
I don't have another one up.
Eh,
You'd have to present that as well.
I did.
But
It's presented there, but
no, that's
can
the only window I've got on my end. But those are your books.
yeah, those are my books. So Sparky, Surviving Sex Magic, is about my childhood growing up inside the MK Ultra program. And then we didn't get there, but the major referred to the 20 years that I spent living in Moscow and running programs to end child trafficking in Moscow, in Russia and former Soviet Union. And then my book on the birth of the Russian mafia is Moscow Traffic. And this is because I worked for 20 years when the mafia was forming in Russia. I know a lot of these people. And so it's filled with true information. And
So let's get your opinion on that. I've had Sasha Latipova on many times, really sharp lady. And I tend to think of Putin as an ally, not a friend, but that he is against the tranny stuff at least.
well, he's good for Russia. He's not our friend, but he's done great things for Russia. There's no question about that.
Okay. Well, no, I think because he indicted in the International Criminal Court Obama and Biden and Harris specifically for the U.S. biolabs. Obama set those up in Ukraine in 1995. So he is not part of the Russian mafia, or what's your take on that?
It's very, very complicated. And every time the Russians try to start a negotiation with the Americans, they start trying to give them the history that the Americans would have to understand to have any idea of what's going on in Russia or in that entire part of the world. And the Americans are always like, "Oh, we don't want any history."
That's interesting. That's what Putin did when he sat down with Tucker. He gave him a history lesson. Started
Has
off with
to. Yeah. And Tucker's like, "Oh, why do you do that?" Well, there's 1,000 years of history here that cannot be ignored. And um, is there a way that you can take that slide down? Because
Sure. Yeah, there we go. That
you
slides
get?
down. If you replace that one with the MK Ultra stuff, I can put that back up.
I have it there. It's there in
No, I don't
section
see
called.
it on my end. Why don't you
Oh,
take the books down since we already had them, and maybe that'll come up.
okay. I took it down. So there it is. There it
There we
is.
go. Okay.
So this changed everything, and this is a huge. This is why trafficking victims and survivors are starting to come forward, because finally they can say, you can't call us crazy. This really happened, and this was released on December 23rd of 2024. Right when nobody's looking for a news story,
Right.
and um, this is where the CIA confesses to basically everything. This is a national security archive with a collection of 1,200 documents and a 33-page summary on the MK Ultra program. And its title is "The Agency Sought Drugs and Behavioral Control Techniques to Use in Special Interrogations and Offensive Operations." And it also includes Sidney Gottlieb's, that was the man I talked about who was in charge of it in 1953, his personnel file and his 1983 deposition and testimony, along with a lot more information that links him to bioweapons and biolabs and vaccines and planning for pandemics. So this is Sidney Gottlieb. He was the man who ran MK Ultra beginning in 1953. And this is Richard Helms, who was head of the CIA during much of the program, although it started under Alan Dulles. But Richard Helms was in charge of it during the Church Commission hearings, and he claims to have destroyed all the records. I'm sure that's absolutely, completely untrue, but that's the story. This is the man who was my primary handler and the friend of my father, supposed friend of my father. His name is George Hunter White, and he was in charge of setting up all the CIA, I call them annexes and safe houses all over the country. And he was also the key link to Eli Lilly Company, who provided the MK Ultra project with unlimited supplies of LSD, and they provided it in tonnage.
That's another link, is the government is the drug dealer, just like the
Yes.
government is the arms runner, which is what I call the dark economy, is people, drugs, and weapons that the
Yes.
deep state runs.
And it started so fast. So it was the guys all meeting in Nuremberg in 1947 to 1949, and then the founding of the CIA, and then the founding of the NSA, and then the links to the drug trade. I mean, it's a very short period of time to get something so large and unlimited going. And they couldn't have done it except that they had the 1,500 Nazi scientists who were already experienced in all of this. And this is a particularly evil man. This is Dr. Ewan Cameron, who ran the project at McGill and was associated then with the Montauk experiment, which led to, I mean, they're looking in the ground now for the remains of the children who were murdered during the Montauk experiments, but the number is looking like it might be up to 5 million. So
Explain the Montauk experiments.
The Montauk experiments were done at Camp Hero, and they were very much focused on the being able to remove your energetic body from your body and send it into other dimensions, meet with other entities, bring other entities across into our reality. Very high mortality rate. It's exactly what we were doing on the coast of Mexico, down on the beach, down on Rosarita Beach. And but in Montauk, they were very successful in bringing entities over who then killed staff and other children. So it was a really just highness. And where those beings are now, I don't know. The Montauk boys I've talked to think that they've been taken to Antarctica. I don't know. They don't really know. But there is now an examination of the ground around Camp Hero, which is turning up the remains of these children that were killed there. It's possible that the deaths from the MK Ultra program are going to exceed the Holocaust, and it's the same Nazi scientists doing it. So we brought them to this country and turned them loose on our own children.
Which is why we're back in Nazis in Ukraine as of.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. We're doing it all over again. So this is McGill University. This is where McEwen had his lab. This is Dr. Gerschichter at Georgetown University, and the CIA they would do this at hospital after hospital. They'd build an entire wing, and then the CIA would take one floor and they'd donate the rest to the hospital. So nobody ever asked any questions. And they talk in the 33-page description, they talk about their concern that the medical staffs of these places wouldn't put up with this, wouldn't go on with it, because obviously they knew there was horrible experimentation going on. And they found that the medical community was very receptive to bribery. It's just appalling. I mean, it's just.
Well, and that's exactly what we saw with the pandemic, with the medical community.
And that's where they got the idea, when they realized, and it's in here. This has collections of documents you can go through, and you'll find, like, they even kept little cocktail notes where they were talking to each other about, well, what do we do about the doctors? And then they talk about what level it takes to bribe doctors, and they start talking about things like massive mind control and pandemics.
So this fits exactly with Ted Kaczynski when he was a kid going to Harvard and being mind tortured by a Harvard professor sponsored by CIA for MK Ultra. But it's interesting that, of course, the FBI went off on a tangent with the guard who actually discovered the bomb, as opposed to going after Kaczynski for 7 years. So do you think that was purposeful? Or you purposeful misdirection on the FBI's part, since that's what they do now so blatantly?
I don't know. I have had no interaction with people in the FBI, but certainly Kaczynski was a mind-controlled person trying to escape from it and trying to fight back. And what happened, and this happened a lot to the Montauk boys, that they would be they were trained as super soldiers and then sent into combat, where they got into all kinds of trouble because they were massive killers. And you've probably run into them. I don't know. It's not my world, but I know the medical world.
So, when you talk about super soldiers, and I think there's a disconnect so I spent a lot of time in special operations and with the elite of the soldiery in the United States, and those were really, for the most part, really fine folks. And they did not come about their elite status by drugs or anything. It was by sweat. So I'm not really familiar understanding the super soldier.
Well, just like Sex Magic was my program, Super Soldier was one of their programs, and they conducted genetic manipulation, massive torture, brutal abuse to get these boys and some women also to become massive triggerable killers. And then they sent them into the front lines because they were quite disposable, and just sent them out to kill because they weren't special forces elite.
I actually have, I'll take that back. I did run across somebody like that. I had a hard time believing him way back then. But I think when you say super soldier, you think of some kind of, massive, physically massive person or something. And again, in my mind, that's not a murderer, is not a soldier. Those are assassins. And, I've often had to correct people and say, I've never been an assassin. I was a soldier. I'm a patriot. I was an intelligence officer. I was a spy, but I was never that. So maybe it is a question of terminology.
Absolutely, because it was a program. And I can tell you that the sex magic had really nothing to do with sex. So it was, but it's
Mhm.
called that. So
No,
if you
of
look at
course, from Nietzsche and the Superman and Super Soldier, that's totally Nazi origin. Yeah.
yeah, so that they would have that. And sex magic came from Aleister Crowley, and
Yeah.
his programs, and Super Soldier came from Ubermensch, and
Yep.
so
And
the
then
idea that
that's
they would,
Major Aquino in
yes,
PSYOPs.
yes,
Yeah.
absolutely. And
Exactly.
he was doing that, and they created uh and they used drugs, and they used abuse, and they used sexual abuse, and they used torture. And so very few lived through it, and the few that I've talked to that did are really damaged. I mean, they're dying of guilt. If they kept their soul, then they are feeling so terrible about what they did. But I'm sure there's plenty that have survived because they were successful killers, but didn't have a soul and probably are feeling just fine about it. I don't know. This is all pretty new because
That may be who's doing the assassinations today, because I wonder about that.
yeah, you look at the IDF, you know how they can just go and kill like that without any remorse or any.
Well, the IDF Zionism connection to Nazism, is which connects to Satanism, is pretty obvious.
It's
Or
so
maybe it's not obvious,
pathologic.
but it's connected. It's connective, which is not Judaism. Again, everybody as well. But yeah, so AP Jonas says, amazing show, Jeffrey. Yeah, if you guys have questions, bring them up. I see Nas at all, and give me some of that arguing with each other. Not going to get into that. But God gifted us with the dorsal vagus nerve shutdown, withdrawing disassociative abilities as needed.
Yes.
AP Jonas, I guess, very aware of that. So let's get back to the document. So then I guess you, as me, see this as a good thing, because I keep talking about, because I'm a follower of Yeshua, is you got to follow Yeshua's protocols. You've actually got to self-reflect, confess, and repent. And so you use the word confession with this document being released. And I assume you did that on purpose. So you see this as a good thing.
Yes, it's a good thing. It takes the pressure off of the survivors who constantly have to prove that they were traumatized. I mean, how awful is that? And when they try to remember or start to remember what actually happened, then they trigger suicide programs, and the mental health profession doesn't understand this at all. So people are dying. I mean, it's completely unnecessary. So this has to be brought up, and it has to be brought forward. And to counter this release, the State Department just released the 2025 Trafficking in Persons report, which
Right.
which is just awful. I was one of the first grantees to get a grant from the Trafficking in Persons office in 2003, and was one of their largest grantees until 2010, when we were doing the counter trafficking work in Russia. They initially supported it, but the report would come out and say, "Oh, the United States, perfect record, no problem, no trafficking, nothing brought in." And
The United States is child trafficking capital of the world and drug
yes,
capital of the world.
yes, and it didn't take us very long in working in the former Soviet Union to discover that the United States was where they were being sent. United States, Germany, and Israel, the three main countries for trafficking from the former Soviet Union. So I came and reported diligently to the State Department. I reported to the UN. I reported to Congress, and nobody listened. Nobody cared. I couldn't understand it because I didn't believe at that point that they were complicit. I do now, So this continued. I kept reporting it. I kept gathering data and sending it, and then the tip reports would come out saying, "Oh, no problem, no trafficking." We documented flights, we documented companies, we documented receivers in the United States, in Brighton Beach and in Virginia Beach, and nothing. They wouldn't lift a finger because the tip report said United States doesn't have this problem. So they're doing it again. So this came out saying massive, massive crime against American citizens, total violation of the Bill of Rights against American children. And the horrible document in here where they come to the conclusion that they have to stop killing so many Americans because sooner or later, the survivors are going to figure out that they have human rights, that their constitutional rights are being violated and they can sue. So the conclusion is that they start bringing in foreigners. This is in the early 60s. So they started bringing in foreign war victims, Ukrainians. I mean, think of what's coming in now. It's got to be just so many Ukrainians being trafficked and brought into the United States, children. But you can find the document in here where they decide that. And they said, well, Americans will have a problem with that if we start bringing in all these blonde refugees and doing terrible things to them. And they said, so they came to the conclusion it would be all right if they called them all Mexicans.
Right.
And they still do that. So,
well, actually, the term is other than Mexican, OTMs. Is so because the Border Patrol at the border, because I worked for a decade, a lot of Mexicans, but then there's OTMs other than Mexicans as a group category.
But in the media, they like when there was the confession that 300,000 children were brought over in 1 year and then distributed throughout the United States.
Yep.
And on a $47 million shipping contract. And it said Mexicans. Because
yep.
Americans, they hear Mexicans and, oh, it's okay, you can do anything to them.
Yep.
We were programmed to accept that. We should say no, none of this. This is all of
no,
this.
And that's why kids from Guatemala or Honduras or something, because there's no real tracking of those kids. And again, I've worked those countries, extensively. That makes total sense as well. But you do see this as a step in the right direction. Finally, this is coming to light, and you see this as a CIA confession. I've said the same Border Patrol, ICE folks that were trafficking children under pedo Joe Biden are now not. But there's no confession. There's no repentance. Theoretically, if the next guy comes in and says, "Hey, we're back to trafficking children," then they'll just go back to trafficking children. There's no ethical, moral, spiritual change.
Yeah, and there's been no takedown of the mechanism, which is through the United Nations, through the International Organization of Migration, who brags on their website that they moved 270 million people in the last 4 years.
I spoke on that in depth about the Refugee Council. Refugee USA
Yes.
Council is the umbrella organization. So it's really, that's again, the global cabal via the deep states of different countries running all these children. But it is coming to light for the first time ever. And there is progress being made. So you're saying that these survivors can then access this as proof and bring civil suits for harm. Do I have that right?
Yeah, I don't think the civil suits have occurred to people yet. It's a survival matter because a lot of them have been on the run for like 20 years, hiding from their families, changing their names, trying to live without Social Security cards. I mean, it's a mess for these people, and so now they can demand their rights. I think the civil suits will come, and they should come because it's a massive action against all of their constitutional rights, their human rights. And also we should speak up for all the children who were killed, who were OTMs and not American citizens, because there were probably 10 times as many of those.
Well, I don't see that happening under the Trump administration.
I'm so disappointed. I had believed that he would, but no.
Yeah, me too.
Mm.
My next hope, I guess, is for RFK. Although there are indications that he has manipulated and sold out to some degree as well, but I just don't see it happening. And it's um, not happy to say that at all, but it's just the truth.
Well, I think the people that released this file and doing it in that kind of sneaky way on the 23rd of December, when it wouldn't be picked up by
Christmas
mainstream
present.
media. It's pretty clever.
Yeah, yeah. And so do you think that was tied into, I don't know if you heard me earlier talking about how there's a Turning Point whistleblower who says that Charlie Kirk got access to the unrestricted Epstein list and he was going to out it as well. And that would have exposed lots of political leaders and of course, Israel as well. That's a tie into what you're saying there with this list. Also, does that make sense to you?
Yeah, and I think that that's one list. I think there's a lot of lists because Jeffrey Epstein was one character in this, and you've got at least 10 more, and he had one island, but there are a lot of islands where they were doing this, and so we have to keep pounding on that Epstein list because he's the one.
Right. Yeah. No, this is the hill we
He's the
die
one we
on.
have by the leg to pull out
Yeah.
of the rabbit hole, and then you'll get the rest of the rabbits.
This is either where we return to being a virtuous populace and rescue a republic, or we just continue to slide into an evil empire.
Absolutely,
I
yes.
think. Yes. Well, very cool, Dr. Engel, and I'm so glad. So you're working with Targeted Justice because you're so detail oriented and organized in your experience, and so it's real interesting to me that, and maybe we should say it like this. So America, United States of America, is drug and child trafficking global headquarters. Russia is not, because it's not like Russia and America are global child trafficking and drug trafficking. No, it's America. It's not that there isn't child trafficking going on in Russia. It's not that there isn't drug trafficking going on, but they are not world headquarters for it.
And Ukraine. So the partnership between United States and Ukraine was based on drug trafficking and human trafficking.
Yes. Yes.
And the same criminals that drove me out of Russia were Ukrainian traffickers who then, because then they got pursued, are all living around me in Virginia. So they're here, and they've got lots of money, lots of lobbying, and they're buying people. So yeah, those two countries. So of course we continue to throw things at Ukraine and push Ukraine. For one thing, we're getting the kids that are being trafficked from there, which have got to be massive. You take away an entire generation of father protectors, and you've got an entire generation of vulnerable, unprotected children.
No, you've made a Nazi Germany now, because the average recruitment age now is 40, because it's been a meat grinder there against Russia.
Yeah, and Russia just dug 10,000 graves in Kupiansk, and Putin told the surrounded soldiers, either you surrender or you're going to be in those graves. Yeah. And Zelensky told them they refused to surrender. So now the Russians are filling the graves. They're killing all those men, and just sickening. So from your point of view, I guess the Ukraine war keeps going because it helps continue to cover up the child trafficking. Yes, and the land grab. People want that land. Yeah, the black soil. Yeah, as well. Well, that totally makes sense, Dr. Engel. So thank you so much for coming on. I'm glad you are going to continue to work with Targeted Justice. I think you're really crucial to their effort and provide a lot of backstopping and reference for Anna's legal work. Yes,
and will in the future.
I'm meeting her later this week. I'm looking forward to it.
Oh, cool. So where can people follow you and get your books?
Go to my website, which I probably didn't put up, but just Google my name, Juliet Engel, and you'll get my
what's your
website.
website again?
It's Juliet Engel.
Oh, JulietEngel.com. Okay.
Yep, that's it.
Yes.
And so you'll get my books. And I've just been too busy to get caught up on my Substack. But yeah, get my books. That'll tell you a lot.
Well, thank you so much for coming on, and God bless.
Thank you, Major.
Okay, so fabulous guest. I didn't see a lot of questions from anybody, but I think it really gave me an insight into the whole Nazi paperclip to OSS to CIA to DARPA that I didn't really understand before, and I hope that's the case for you. So I see some of you guys arguing on Rumble. You know, I don't think that's particularly helpful. Yeah, lawsuits mean discovery. Last thing I wanted to cover before I wrap up here is, and I'm trying to get this guy on the show too, Andrej Karpathy, who is an AI expert. He is one of the founding members of OpenAI. Last Friday, threw cold water on the idea that artificial general intelligence is around the corner, and also singularity, which is another BS myth. It is not happening. And he said AI cannot reason about anything it already hasn't been trained on, which is, of course, not what we human beings can do. You know, I say this all the time, is it's obvious that a creature in the creation will always be more sophisticated than anything that the creature creates. It is clear. But Karpathy says, as much as we like to anthropomorphize large language models, they're not comparable to humans or even animals the way they learn. That's what he's saying, is animals are smarter. And if you've worked with animals like I have, in depth, like horses, you'll know that's true. But if you've just sat in the lab and you've never been around anybody, then you don't know. Karpathy points out that oversimplifying the learning process, just because a model ends up at the right final answer, doesn't mean that every step it did up to that point was correct, and vice versa. Karpathy likened to sucking supervision through a straw. So a founder who wants to build a successful company can reflect on the company building processes and think about what went right or wrong to bring those insights to the next company, regardless of whether the first company was ultimately successful. The AI version of this would have to be to have a model get feedback on every step of the thought process. And some have tried that, but that can get very expensive and very tedious. And recently, OpenAI landed in hot water for making claims that GPT-5 had solved new math problems that it had actually just looked up the answers to. And he said this, that GPT-5 did not solve the math problem that's been open for decades. The author of the problem had published Erdos, and his name is Erdos, had published the problem, I guess, on some kind of websites where people follow that kind of thing. And ChatGPT had done a search, and somebody else had found and solved the problem. But GPT did not do that. They just found it, but they said that they did it. That is not true. GPT-5 didn't actually solve the math problem. It merely surfaced online publications by other mathematicians who had solved these problems. And so that would be called, plagiarism. And so then they deleted their posts that said that. But the whole point is AI cannot replace humans, but new large language models, LLMs, AI, that started with OpenAI and Microsoft, do have some value as a tool to assist humans and make their work easier and quicker. I'll do that when I'm searching. I like some of the summaries, but sometimes I see that they are wrong, and I certainly don't rely on them by any means. But large language models lack cognition, and most jobs still cannot be automated. And so that is very important in the article. This concludes by saying the article is written by Human Superior Intelligence, HSI, and that is very true. C. Earl Jackson, Alex Craner, not familiar with him, but send me jp@jeffreyprither.com, send me a point of contact, and I will take a look and see about having him on there. Okay, well, happy haunted Halloween. The Frankenstein federal government jolted to directed energy nanobotted artificial life by the post 9/11 Patriot Act, and the ghosts of deep state demonocracy are once again weaving chemtrail webs of spook sabotage and fear mongering false flags via ghost grifters high on adrenochrome and baby bodies. Hate us, but fear us. They cry. Watch us as we kill preborns and call it health. Rape children as we say it's undocumented immigration. We were just talking about that. Celebrate Satanism as artistic expression. Hate us much, but fear us more. But most of all, detest us most. Will push, poke, prod, and provoke with our pedos, pimps, pushers, and prostitutes in your schools and on your screens until you react and revolt. And then we can finally and overtly do what we long for and do best, which is repress, repress, repress.